Recently, I met a young lady who, about 20 years old, we'll call her Jill, just, I don't know, because it occurred to me. She was living with a truly pathetic boyfriend. 30 years old, no job, hadn't had a job in forever, lived with her, ate her groceries, slept in her bed, used her car. I mean, not a deep relationship. She'd had 3 long-term, now she's 20 years old. She'd had 3 long-term relationships before this, no, including this, to be fair, and uncounted brief relationships. You might guess correctly that all of her life she's been treated like an object in relationships. I mean, it's just, it's a nightmare. So I suggested that there was no way to repair all this and that she just stop it all. Start off with throwing the boyfriend out. There was nothing worth modifying in that relationship. Kind of like living in Georgia and walking in the woods and seeing a tree that's rotted standing up and asking what we could do to revive it and cut it down. Throw the boyfriend out. She did, which is amazing, evidence of trust. And then a week later, because she got lonely, and this is more common than I can tell you, she let him back in. And it, always starts off with something innocent. Well, I have a gift for you. Well, yeah, I would bet you would, to have a free place to stay and somebody to sleep with and somebody's car to use and no job. And yeah, I would think every once in a while a gift would be a good idea. So he came back and ended up staying for a day. But she was brilliant. She texted me and said, he's back, which is really smart. Are you hearing this? I mean, everybody gets to make mistakes. We all make them, lots of mistakes. What matters is how long do you persist in them? So within a matter of hours, she texted and said, he's back. And I can't remember, it was late at night or something, and it was cold, and I must have been feeling uncharacteristically compassionate. And so I said, okay, well then wait till 8 in the morning and throw him out. And she did. Changed her phone number, and stayed away from him. Now, it should be no great surprise that she lets everybody else treat her like garbage too. Her father treats her like garbage. So she goes over there to visit at his request, and then he yells at her and tells her she's stupid and makes her feel bad about herself. And so we just kept right on going. First she throw the boyfriend out, and then we throw dad out until he gets either some brains in his head, which is not very likely with parents, or she becomes strong enough to deal with this, which meant missing 2 major family celebrations at his house. It just nearly killed her, but she didn't go. I'm telling you this story because this takes uncommon trust and courage. And yet, each time she said no and got over the initial, I feel guilty, which parents are especially good at doing, she felt wonderful. Then her girlfriends started gossiping about her because her girlfriends use her too for a place to come and stay, a place to come and live when they break up with their boyfriends, a place to smoke and drink. And so the girlfriends started hounding her about how her behavior is changing. I said, well, more taking out the garbage. And so she said, well, how do I know which ones to keep? I said, this is easy. Send me copies of 4 or 5 randomly selected texts from any of them that you think you'd like to keep as friends. She ended up with 3 out of a list that started off considerably longer. She finally wrote and said, am I ever going to find any really good friends? Yeah, but only after getting rid of the old ones and the old ways and the old notions of who you are. We've talked about this before. We're going to talk about it again. changing our lives is like moving to a new planet. Maybe we haven't talked about it a lot, but I wrote a blog about it, so in my head it seems like a lot. You can't move to a new planet till you leave the old one. Or the old one will suck you back. In fact, if you try to stand simultaneously on the new planet and the old planet, eventually you end up doing an incredibly painful form of the splits. In the beginning, our old experiences are simply bigger. They're more numerous. The mass, if you want to use a physics term, the size of the old planet is bigger. So the gravity is bigger. Gravity is always related to mass. And it will pull you right off a new way of living. So you kind of have to change the whole thing. And if possible, scurry around clear to the other side of the new planet so you don't get pulled off. And that's exactly what this 20-year-old girl did, which most 40, 50, and 60-year-old people don't have the sense to do. To be fair, by the time you get to be 50 years old, the old planet's bigger. So it's easier at 20 in some ways. But what a lot of courage. She's a model for the rest of us, which is why I'm telling the story. The other day this has, I don't think, anything to do with real love at all, but every once in a while a story intrigues me. I was in the house and I was looking out and back, and those of you who've been here know that there's a big yard and a creek and a bridge and a lake out there. And I look back there and there's some kids out there fishing on the dock. Sort of parenthetically, my dock. Not just my dock because I'm possessive, but I built the thing. And I went out to check on them just because periodically we get people out there who are, fishing on the dock and drunk and breaking beer bottles, which when you drop a broken beer bottle into water, I just don't find that all that funny. And they weren't drunk and they were having fun. So I asked how old they were. And, they both said at the same time, 14. They were good kids. They were polite. I said, well, have fun and keep fishing. I said, I was 14 once. And the smaller of the two kids went with a sincerity you couldn't do if you'd gone to acting school. When I said I was 14 once, he went, really? This is one of those moments when you feel very old. A lady wrote to me recently and said, being right doesn't satisfy me so much anymore. I'd rather feel loved. That was pretty beautiful. In fact, it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that until we get to the point where feeling loved is more satisfying to you than being right, you'll keep being right. And you'll keep being unhappy. Here's somebody who wrote, and I don't remember who. A month ago, this person says, I attended a workshop organized by Pete and Nikki Uglow in the UK. I had never heard of real love, but a friend asked if I wanted to attend a workshop with her, so I went to support her, and I was struck by the smiling faces and how happy everybody seemed. This is got to be an act, right? And she says in capital letters, nobody is this happy. I talked to a strange young man named Ben, and yes, dear, we all think that Ben is strange also, who was telling me that he wanted nothing from me, nothing at all, and that he cared about me and my happiness. Again, all caps. What? With a question mark and an exclamation mark. Was he deranged or something? The jury's out on that, honey. But he really does care about people. But her opinion is, possibly premature, no, he wasn't deranged. And yeah, he did seem to care about my happiness. Every barrier that I had was systematically eliminated. It felt like people were saying, I know you're scared, terrified, uncomfortable, but don't care. I'm going to come through and get close to you anyway. What Ben started that Saturday, Pete continued it. And despite saying to myself, you will never in this lifetime catch me on Pete's lap, there I was in the next 2 minutes sitting on his lap. I have never been held like that in my life. It was how I'd always imagined a daddy would hold me, but never did. I'm a mess. I want to thank you for Pete Uglow. Honey, I can't take credit for that, nor would I try. For he's an amazing man, and I don't tend to like or trust men, or rather didn't until Pete and Real Love came along. Notice she didn't mention Ben, if Ben is watching. That was a joke for the rest of you who think I'm making fun of Ben. She continues, my dark, dark world now for the first time has a chink of light in it. I intend to hold tight to that light. I'm moving toward it as I follow the guidance of the people in the Real Love community. Dare I hope to actually have love, peace, joy, and happiness in my life? You know, I think I just might. After a lifetime of not knowing real love, being frightened to trust, being fearful of everything, not knowing how to deal with the past and present abuse, at least I now know that with real love, I can overcome these memories and wounds and discard the baggage once and for all. What a gift. What a miraculous email. She just was barely introduced to real love weeks ago. Now, there are going to be some of you who are going to be listening to this going, well, I trusted slower than that, and so I'm not as good a person because I get these emails later. We all learn at a different pace. My point is just, we can really make a choice. Now, notice she started off going, I'm not going to believe these people. These people are crazy. They're deranged. But she stayed there. Just like the 20-year-old girl that I was talking about before this woman, who, even though she is terrified of being alone, she threw her boyfriend out because she decided she'd rather be happy than just not alone. She decided to do something to get real joy as opposed to simply temporarily diminishing her pain. And that's what this woman from the UK did. That just might be the ultimate secret. It's always about trust, but see, you can say I trust easily. It's when you when you let go of diminishing pain and instead take steps toward feeling loved, which means trusting, and feeling happy. That's when you're really trusting. Because pain relief is, well, pretty crazy addictive. New subject. This writer says, I don't know, it was an email, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if I'm going backward or what here, but I think I've discovered that I'm a really selfish person. Well, I know this person, and so I can speak to, and I can't remember if it's a him or her. I may find that out here in a minute. But I could speak from experience. All of your life, you've been deprived of love. It's an unbearably painful condition, which has caused you to focus on filling your own needs. I mean, look at the unassailable logic. Nobody else has filled your needs, so who's left? You. Well, so of course you've filled your own needs. And that's called selfishness. But this kind of selfishness is also unavoidable. What else could you have done? Just sat around and waited for longer? You continue. And I've been incapable of being happy for other people or loving them. Sometimes. But again, you've been in pain all of your life, and you've been learning to feel more loved now, and you're thinking in old world terms, old planet terms. Yes, up to recently, you haven't been capable of being happy for others or loving them, but you're starting to be able to do that. So condemning yourself this thoroughly might be unwarranted. You continue. When other people say how they feel loved, often I'm not happy for them. I'm jealous. I feel like such a hypocrite. I don't think I was this selfish before. Well, I hate to break your heart, but yeah, you probably were. You just didn't see it because everybody around you was selfish, and all you knew was selfish. So why would you identify it as selfish? You would identify it as normal. Now you're getting less selfish. You're getting more filled with unconditional love. You just, from time to time, go back to the old selfish planet. So you're comparing yourself to other people sometimes. You still feel jealous, just silly stuff that you used to do. And then you conclude, I don't think people's happiness would have caused jealousy the same way a few months ago, but I'm just going to keep trying to be loving. I'm going to pick on just one phrase, not to pick on you, but as an illustration to everybody else who's listening. Trying to love doesn't work very well. Truly changing your judgment about yourself and everybody else and your past and your wounds and all of that and the future and the possibilities that you now have and trusting people, a true change in judgment does work very well. In the old world, love was measured and competed for and compared. In this loving world, we don't do any of that. You have enough. And with time, you're going to be able to feel love that's already there that you're not feeling now. So you'll lose your need to compare or to feel jealous. I promise. So just stick with it, kid. Change your judgment. Don't try harder. I know a woman who has been in real love for years and has been somewhat on the slow side to trust, but she doesn't quit. Speed counts for nothing, really. It's the old tortoise and the hare story. It's persistence that counts. I've had the opportunity to know a great number of really brilliant people in my life, and people who are fast at learning, fast at moving, fast at doing lots of things. I haven't noticed that they're happier than other people at all. But people who persist in trying to learn, people who persist in doing good, those people succeed. She said, last night I had amazing experiences going on a hike with several real love people. One of them offered me a ride. And even though I had no idea how it would go and whether I could handle a big group event, I accepted. That should have been said with fireworks. You went to something new. You chose to do something where you couldn't predict the outcome, in your own words. Outstanding. That is how change happens. Not from brilliance. It's continuing to move forward in faith and trust when you don't know what the outcome is. You moved. I've said this to you 100 times. And you're doing it more and more often, moving. Until we're moving, we can't really call it trust. I talk to uncounted people who bemoan their life condition while they're sitting in the same position on the couch where I talked to them last time and the time before that and the year before that. They're sitting on the couch complaining, but they're not moving. They take no risks and they're afraid of moving. All understandable, but it's guaranteed to keep us in the same place, which is miserable. You continue. Just talking to her in the car, the lady who took me to the event, on the way there, turned out to be a good experience. Everything does when you trust. We talked about shared interests, but what I felt the most from her was how well she listened and how much she wants to care about people, even me. Which never would have happened, kid, if you hadn't gotten off your butt and moved and gone to the event. You made this possible. Yes, she listened to you. She was compassionate. She was loving. And it wouldn't have mattered one bit. You would never have discovered that if you'd stayed on the couch. You said, when she asked me about my experiences in real love, it was obvious that she was genuinely interested, not just making conversation. I felt like she really cared. And as I listened to her share, I could see in her, I could see her in moments and feel more connected because I could see her. It just felt good to have a loving exchange. You're learning how to be a person, my dear. For the first 30 years of your life, you were not really a human being. You're just a reaction to pain. That takes no skill, takes no choice. In fact, there are no choices involved. You're becoming a real person with your own interests and abilities. Who can actually, you're somebody who can actually have a conversation with another person, which a year ago you would not have thought possible. So this is very cool what you're describing. You keep going. When we went hiking, I noticed a shift in the way I saw other people there. One person in particular I've seen as childish, obnoxious, and rude as he does pretty much, as does pretty much everyone who comes in contact with him. So you're probably right that he is obnoxious, childish, and rude, since everybody thinks that. Whenever I've been around him for more than 2 minutes, I've wanted to just get the hell away. Most groups have somebody like that. So imagine how empty and unhappy his life must be. That is an example of changing a judgment, as opposed to just trying harder to love, like the person, I think, one or two before you said. You said, but as I lost fear and saw him in a way I never have before, this young man plays pranks on people, talks endlessly, complains about everything because he's desperate for somebody to pay attention to him. I don't know what his family situation is, but it's clear he never got what he needed as a kid and feels very alone. So now he tries to get it from everyone around him in ways that tragically make him more alone, because people don't like his manipulative behaviors. Just like the rest of us. If we don't have real love, it's a guarantee that the behaviors we use to feel less alone make us feel more alone. Because we use people, and although we might get away with it for a minute, they end up hating it and leaving us, and then we're more alone. And even if they don't leave us immediately, we're aware that we're manipulating them, and so we feel more alone. It's awful. You said he's really not a jerk trying to be difficult. He's just a lost little boy looking to be loved. Now, this is remarkable coming from you, because your entire life you've been just a lost little girl looking to be loved. And here you have the compassion to say that here's a lost little boy. That's pretty striking. You said, when I could see that, I no longer felt the need to run away from him. I was no longer afraid of him. Perfect. And for you, woohoo. After the hike, the lady who drove me there, Lisa, invited me to play volleyball with the group, something they do every week after the event. I hesitated. I'm a complete klutz at sports, and I was afraid of looking stupid and feared that I'd already pushed past the point of adaptation, but I decided to take a chance and go anyway, and it turned out to be great. And let me interject again, because you moved. At first, I was hugely self-conscious as I tried to serve the ball. Those of you who aren't familiar with volleyball, you hit the ball to the other team, and then pretty much the point begins. I failed to even make contact with the ball. So when you're serving in volleyball, you hold the ball with one hand, and you simply hit the ball out of your hand with the other hand. So you really do have to be a bit of a klutz not to be able to hit a ball that you're holding. It's not like it's coming at you 100 miles an hour. So you're right, you're a bit of a physical klutz, but you didn't quit. And then you continue. I didn't make contact with the ball, let alone get it over the net. But several people there made an effort to include me and encourage me, and one person in particular went out of his way to show me how to hit the ball. I was amazed when I told myself, okay, I can just do this, and just did what he said, and it worked, and the ball went over the net. How cool is that? I mean, who cares where the ball went over the net? There's probably not a person on earth who remembers the score of the game that day. But you kept trying. And then you said the ball went over the net again. This is you serving the ball. And then you served the ball over the net again, 3 times in a row. Very cool. Not the getting it over the net. The big thing is that you kept going. The ball going over is fun, a bonus, but there is no task that we're going to accomplish ever in our lives that is as important as our feeling loved and our doing what we can to help other people feel loved. No task is more important than a person. No volleyball score is as important as the love of a person. You said, I know that he could tell how much I was struggling, and I felt how much I have to be grateful for in having people who do go out of their way to help me grow. Yeah, bless his heart. I want to just kiss him on the forehead myself. Last night, I felt more alive than ever before. It really is as simple as choosing to keep going and not stop. After coming home, it hit me. I can keep doing this. I can keep having these connections. It's not a one-time freakish thing where I go out into the world, feel peaceful, and go back into my cave. I have some friends, which is something you couldn't have said several years ago, that I can go out and do things with on a regular basis and find this level of peace all the time. Even though for years I've seen this choice and never made it consistently enough for it to become a way of life, last night proved to me, beyond all doubt, that I can do this. This can actually work. I can have a life. Very cool, kid. And yeah, you really can. New subject. Here's somebody who writes, I went out with a guy a couple of weeks ago, and there wasn't that much chemistry for me. He was respectful. He was willing to wait to be intimate sexually. In other words, you must have told him, you know, we're not just doing this to get laid. We're going to actually practice having a relationship. And he was willing, which is pretty cool because many guys just immediately go, hors d'oeuvres were good. I'm going home. He wanted to know more about unconditional love, and he wants to have a richer spiritual life. So good start, right? But he asked me out again, and I turned him down. I'm confused why I turned him down. He has what I say I want, but now I'm not interested in him because the chemistry just wasn't there. This isn't hard to explain. All your life, you have picked men based on imitation love. Every dating site's profiles are based on imitation love. Here are all the things that I like for imitation love. Here's what I offer you for imitation love. And if the imitation love match is good enough, then we'll exchange an email. We do it automatically. Physical appearance, intelligence, confidence, real or pretended, similarity to somebody we once knew, a particular smile, shape of a body, whatever. The whole world operates on this kind of imitation love. And now you've learned, after 2 divorces and uncounted failed relationships, not picking on you, by the way, that all that stuff, all of it, doesn't work, like as in at all. They did a study of dating sites. They analyzed millions of questions and answers to see the correlation between the questions and the long-term happiness in relationships. Now, keep in mind that this study is kind of flawed from the beginning because the definition of happiness in a relationship for most of us is that we just get along, since we don't know what real love is. But back to the study. They analyzed millions of questions. They found only one question that had any correlation with long-term success. You know what it was? Do you smoke? That was it. Now, the smoking is kind of obvious. Smokers don't like to be around smokers. It's not a bigoted thing. They just don't like smoke, or they'd be smokers. The point is, all those other questions didn't mean a thing. We do not know what to look for in a partner, and neither do the dating website people at all. They don't know how to ask questions about real love because they've never even heard of it, which is why we're still trying to work on a real love and dating website, which we've been talking about for years. So you finally find a man who is at least interested, possibly, in learning about how to have a real relationship, and you turn him down. Why? Because you're not used to this. And what he had to offer was not on the surface as exciting as the usual imitation stuff. So you reject him for the lack of imitation excitement. Okay, that's your right, but your perspective is screwed up because of your past. You already know that your old criteria for a partner don't work. They never have. You've tried it over and over again. So why not find out, instead of rejecting him, why not find out if you could become interested? So for example, when I first bought the property on which my house sits now, I looked out in the backyard and it was awful. I mean, it was briars and weeds and thorns and a swamp, and it was awful. I could very easily have just said, oh, that's just garbage, and moved, or not bought the place. I saw what it could become and turned it into that. You can do that with potential partners. You just really don't know. You just don't know what's possible because you've never done it. You've never dated for the right reasons before. So who knows what's possible? Just saying. So what could you do? So you invite him to study Real Love and Dating with you. Read it out loud together. And you will find out in a big hurry who he really is. I mean, who knows? You don't know who he is. It's very likely he doesn't know who he is. This is new territory for both of you. So why back out just because it's unfamiliar? Because it's not on the surface bedazzled enough. And there's not much risk, since you already know that the old way is death. You've proven that. You conclude, if I bring him back into my world, I could not be loving for him. It seems like I'm more interested in the ones who don't want a second date with me. No, you're just trained to follow the meaningless garbage that everybody else finds attractive in people. And here's a chance for you to change as much as for him to learn. How fun. Let's see what happens. Here's a mother who writes and says, Zoe turned 2 years old 3 months ago. I've been really frustrated with her lately because she's peeing all over the place, even though she knows not to. Ironically, I was angry and forcing her to use the potty, even though I know not to do that, the forcing part. The thing is that the thing that finally potty trained her was when I backed off completely and let her tell me when she needed to go. Way faster than what I had been doing. Faster, simply just explaining the concept to her. When I did it the loving way, the loving and teaching way, I'm sure I've heard this phrase before, I think from the parenting book, Loving and Teaching. When I did it that way, it took about 2 days for her to be completely potty trained. Amazing, huh? Anyway, this morning I regrouped and I apologized to her for being angry, to a 2-year-old. She got this grumpy, hurt look on her face and she said, Mommy, don't be angry at me. It's mean. No talking and be angry. End quote. I was loving for the rest of the day, and she hasn't had a single accident. Honestly, when I email you these stories, half the time, I wonder if I'm making this stuff up, but it's happening too often to be a fabrication. This is what it's like to raise children with loving and teaching, as opposed to discipline, training, yelling, bribing, punishing, all of that stuff that certainly at 2 doesn't work and works even worse when they're 16. Here's somebody who says, I get fearful when I hear about the violence in the world. You know, ISIS, ISIL, there's just so much hate in the world, people killing each other. And it's estimated that right now there are 50 million people who are on the move, moving from what was once their home to some place that they think will be better because where they lived was intolerable. It'd have to be pretty intolerable for people to leave everything that was familiar to them. 50 million people. So I get fearful when I hear about all this violence. Is this real fear, or is it just my own PCSD, PTSD from experiencing so much interpersonal violence as a child? Oh, mostly your fear. Sure, violence in the world is a terrible thing, but I know you. You're not in it. And the likelihood that you're going to be affected by that kind of violence in the near future, the genuine likelihood, very, very low. And even if you were, because see, I correspond with people all over the world. And I know people who are in these areas of violence where you'd think that their fear would be entirely justified. They still choose to be happy. At worst, all they could do is kill you. Turns out that people are far, far less afraid of dying than they are afraid of dying alone and unloved. You continue. As a kid, I felt quite frequently that I was in danger, my body and even my soul, like I could be crushed or killed at any time, and nobody would care much. What a horrible feeling. It's the worst to feel like we can be injured, isolated, abandoned, and there's nothing we can do about it, which is how you felt. You were surrounded by emotional and physical danger, and you had to bear it alone. No support, no relief, no understanding, no companionship, no understanding of what you were even experiencing. It was a living hell. You said my oldest brother was like some kind of like crazy, like ended up being institutionalized. And he would blow up and hit me and scream and throw things, and I was literally afraid that he would kill me. His emotions were very unpredictable. And I remember seeing him go from smiling and laughing to violently angry, beating up my brother, who was only a year and a half older than me. You lived in a chaotic, horrifying world. Nobody can know how awful that was for you. And then you say, we two youngest, my brother and I, spent time alone with him and nobody else at home. In other words, you two spent time alone with the psychotically crazy brother, which was terrifying. We had, and he had a build very much like yours, meaning me, which I assume by you mean sleek, athletic, slender, you said, which was intimidating. How different your life is now. You feel safe, you feel loved, you feel understood almost all the time. What a blessing. Occasionally, you indulge in reading about the violence in the world and you get flashbacks to your own fears. But you're doing great. Most of the world lives in some variation of how you were raised as a child. In some ways worse, in some ways better. It doesn't really matter. A child only needs to feel threatened, and that's about all they can take. They don't do much in terms of degree. Children. Threatened, more threatened. No, they either feel loved or they don't feel loved. The cool thing is that you've begun to change your life. And the cool thing is that we can all do something about the tragedy that we once lived when we were kids. This is from a guy who has been practicing real love for more than a year. He said, I've not been happy lately, even though there's nothing obviously worse than before. You've told me that I tend to complain a lot, and I'm not grateful for what I have. I'm not sure, and for the benefit of those who are listening, he's not making this up. He says, I'm not sure I know how to be grateful. When people are unkind or don't consider what I need, I don't know how to be grateful. We all like it that we get to make our own decisions. We have choice, the single most important principle in the universe. I'm not kidding. Without it, we'd be little more than furniture. But if we get to make our own choices, which we just love, so does everybody else. Everybody. All the time. And guess what? Sometimes they'll make choices that won't serve us. Shockingly, they'll sometimes make choices that benefit them. Imagine. That's called human nature. We tend to focus on what we don't get. And that's entirely understandable. When we don't get what we want, we feel neglected, we don't feel cared about. And if we haven't been loved, which is true of nearly all of us, then not getting anything else like attention, cooperation, sex, food, money, praise, respect, whatever, is painful, even intolerable. Pain is simply more memorable than pleasant moments, which makes it harder, but not impossible, to be grateful. Different studies have said that pain is between 7 and 20 times more memorable than pleasure. At one point I lived for a couple of years in the South Pacific islands of Samoa, which, if you're wondering what that's near, nothing. Water, and then more water. And the medical conditions were kind of primitive. And I got a toothache once, and went to the dentist, and they don't numb your tooth in the first place. And then he started to drill, and I noticed that the drill made a completely different sound from the drill at home, because he ran the drill with his own foot, like women used to do 2,000 years ago when they ran their sewing machines with what's called, most little kids wouldn't even know the name of this, it's called a treadle-driven sewing machine or drill. You power it with your own foot. It moves really slowly, and so it prolongs the pain. It was a truly horrible experience, so memorable that even though I've been to the dentist now a great number of times since then, and the experiences have overall been relatively painless, when we go to the dentist, I'm embarrassed to say, like a little kid, Donna goes to the dentist with me and holds my hand. One day, one of the receptionists at the dentist's office said, "You can't go in there." And Donna gave her the look. She backed off. Donna went and sat down and held my hand. And the lady stood at the door, kept making gestures for Donna to come out. And Donna pretended she was blind. We all do this. You do that. You focus on your pain rather than simply being aware equally of all the good things you do have. Solution? What we've talked about before, which is way more powerful than trying to be anything, trying to be grateful, trying to be loving. The solution is to change your perspective, your judgment, your focus. That is what gratitude really is, not an attitude. When I hear that, gratitude is an attitude, I just get sick to my stomach. It's not. It's simply telling the truth. Put your hand on your chest when you don't know what gratitude is. When somebody has specifically refused to give you something you've requested that you want, or perhaps even need. And remember that I've been right there many times. Repeat to yourself over and over. Greg loves me. God loves me. My wife is really working at loving me, and she's doing much better than she's ever done in our marriage. I have a bright mind and ability to earn a living. I'm alive. I have children to love in a way that my parents never dreamed possible. I live in a country not torn by civil war or disease. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. That's not an attitude. It's simply telling the truth about all the good things that you do have. And then the one or two things that somebody's withholding from you seem kind of, meaningless. You continue. Should I always express the gratitude I feel for others every time I'm grateful, or is it more internal? Sometimes both, but more internal. Is saying, so you continue and say, so is gratitude saying thank you? Or is it more like telling people that I'm grateful for X and why I'm grateful for it? Kind of both, but gratitude is demonstrated more in the way you feel and how you treat people. If you really want to know if somebody's grateful, just watch them. They don't need to say a word. Oh, I'm so grateful. And then they go off, they say it to your face, and then they go off and talk about you behind your back. No, they're not. Watch people's behavior if you want to know the truth. Don't listen to their words. The instant you, for example, complain about what you don't have, you prove that you're not grateful. When you're demanding toward people, all gratitude is gone. Gratitude is proven by what we do. You say, my wife, for example, will get tired of me saying thank you and tells me that she doesn't need to hear how grateful I am about everything all the time. And since I know her, I can just hear her tone of voice. That's because what she's saying is sometimes your behavior doesn't match your gratitude, your expressed gratitude, your words. Few things more irritating than that contradiction. Somebody says, oh, I love you so much, and then they treat you badly, and you're going, all right, so you don't love me and you're a liar. People don't like that. So what she's saying is show it rather than say it. Be nice to her. Let her be herself. And finally, is it okay for me to want anything at all? Or is that always an indication that I'm not grateful enough? No, of course you can want things. You can always want things anytime you want. But if you don't do that on a foundation of gratitude, nothing you get will be enough. And your ingratitude will show through every time. Here's a woman who's done real love for many years, but she's been, let's say, resistant and reluctant for most of that time. Yeah, this is a good one. She said this, how many times have you told me to just keep going? Now, the reason I paused is because just keep moving this is the third person that I've emphasized that with. She says, how many times have you told me to just keep going, to stop the fussing, the worrying, and just keep moving? Well, I've finally been doing it, and frankly, wow. A lot of good is coming from just keeping going. Today I went with a new friend, Lisa, baking with her and visiting a friend of hers, Melanie. Melanie is someone I've seen at church as very withdrawn and alone. I learned she has no family connections, no real friends, and just retreats into her head where she feels safe. Melanie feels alone, that's all. Just like you have all your life. But here you are, pay attention, interacting with her and seeing what you can do to love her. You're moving. It's exciting. You say, when we met with her, Melanie seemed really checked out, and I felt awkward at first. Yeah, like people used to feel around you when you checked out. I was afraid that I would screw the whole thing up in thinking of myself and in not knowing how to help her or what to say to her. But when I stopped, there have been some real themes going through this video chat. When I stopped trying so hard to make it right, to say the right thing, and just listened, and just was myself. When I just spoke what I felt, I started to feel connected. Perfect. You just did something instead of worrying about doing it wrong. You moved. You were yourself. The single most important thing that you could do while you're with this frightened person is not be afraid. It's not about saying the right words. I could give you near perfect words to say to somebody who's feeling withdrawn and afraid. And if you were afraid yourself as you said them, you'd make her feel worse. So it's not the words. It's your lack of fearlessness that's making the difference here and will continue to make the difference. Tomorrow I'm going on a hike with Lisa and then with her family for a Christmas Eve dinner, and then I'm going to go out for hockey the next day. I'm sorry, you who've never done anything and who've stayed in your apartment for months at a time, and you're going to go on a hike, go for a Christmas Eve dinner, and go for hockey all within 24 hours. Do you get it? You're moving. How cool is this? I can see now that it's worth every effort it took to make it happen. This is from her. It was only possible because of what you told me to do, to stop fussing and keep going. Had I continued trusting my fear, that's an interesting phrase in case you missed it. Notice what she said. We have a tendency to tell people to just trust. No, it's trust me. And I don't mean me. I mean, if you're the one who's speaking, you'd say trust me. Trust me, trust the truth, trust love, trust people, because we're always trusting something. People who are angry are trusting that they're going to get their way with anger. They're trusting that they're going to be happy with anger. And notice what she says here. Had I continued trusting my fear, that's what she'd been doing all these years, trusting her fear, which is crazy. Then she continues, and had I continued trusting my crazy thinking, fear and crazy thinking are almost indivisible, I would still be in it, alone and miserable in my room. Wow, kid, you've learned a lot. So, keep going. Very cool. Here's somebody who says, for 3 years now, I've been teaching at this university, and I've always wanted to talk to the students about real love and happiness, but because our course is mathematics, I couldn't see a way to bring in real love, Yeah, I kind of do. They do seem sort of not related. But the students, you continue, so obviously need it that I wanted to make a way. This was the last week of the semester, and I took about half the time of one class to talk about the motivations for education. I didn't mention the word love, only talked about feeling worthy and being confident and not being afraid. And the next day, I decided to select some parts of your book and write them down on the board. The students were surprised and curious. I wrote 10 sentences I had chosen from the Real Love book on the board, and they were so interested and started to discuss it with much greater enthusiasm than they'd ever discussed math ever all year. When the class was finished, one of them came and drew a lot of little hearts around the sentences. And everyone started to take pictures with the board and with me and the things that were written on the board. I will never forget that day. Now we're going to tie several things together here. She lives in one of those countries where there has been a history of violence. She lives in one of those countries in the Middle East. And she taught her students about love, and they couldn't wait to hear more. Everybody's dying to learn how to actually live life. But who teaches them? Nobody. What do parents teach their children? Parents teach their children how to please them, the parents. They don't teach them life. So the kids learn nothing. The parents teach nothing. The teachers teach nothing. And then the kids' lives are screwed up forever. We all have many opportunities to love and teach. Don't be afraid. People are eager. So what do? You find love for yourself. You trust love instead of fear and crazy thinking, to use the words of one of the people that I've been quoting. You remember the love you have, and then you have the courage to share it, as this mathematics professor did in the Middle East. If we'll do that, we will be happy, and we will increase the chances for happiness, and frankly, since we've been talking about the subject of violence, we'll be increasing the chances for peace everywhere we go. We'll see you in a week.